Welcome to the studio, everyone. Today, we're going to take a look at bonded leather. There's a couple things that make this a unique and very useful leather. It depends primarily on what it's being used for, and it could also be a deceptively cheap leather, depending on how it's made and what it's used for. So we're going to look at three things. The first is what is bonded leather. We're also going to look at what that fiber structure and composition is, so you understand what makes it different than regular types of leather. And we're going to look at what items it's good to use for and what tips there may be for crafting with it so that you're using it in the right ways. So with that, let's dive right in. So what is bonded leather? So bonded leather is actually a man-made material that's created to look like natural leather. And it's often made with actual scraps of natural leather, but then combined with other substances and essentially ground into like a really fine powder and mixed together with some stabilizing materials, maybe some adhesives, and it kind of gives you what's essentially like the spam or the scrapple, if we're looking at metaphors of the leather world. It's taking all these little bits and kind of just mixing them together into like a soup that then hardens into what is now a material. So in general, bonded leather is made from at most 30% leather mixed in. It can be made from some recycled materials, and additionally, different smells can be added to it to make it appear as if it's natural leather. So it's easy to be deceived by bonded leather. However, there are some good uses for it as well. Before we dive into that, let's take a look at the fiber structure themselves. So you can see here in the top view, we have a pretty unique look to it. Typically on a leather piece, we're going to see some kind of surface variations. We're going to see maybe some holes where the hair follicles had been, and we're going to see that usual leather look. In here, it's a little bit more uniform in that it's mostly smooth. And we can start to see how it's got a little bit different of a composition, because rather than being natural of a surface, it's been essentially mixed and then flattened. And here's what we've got. So that's our first clue as to what this may be. Looking at the bottom of it, we see again a little bit more of a uniform pattern. And since bonded leather can be made to any shape, form, thickness, we could see here how it's got essentially a uniform pattern from when it was finished on the backside. And then it gets interesting when we take a look at this section, because here we could see a lot more difference between natural leather and bonded leather. In natural leather, we're going to see those layers of the hide as we move through like the corium junction and we get towards the surface of it, the fibers, the density, it's going to change as it goes through. And we're going to usually see those fibers in there. Looking at bonded leather, it's a little more of a consistent, dense mix. And because that is exactly what it is. It's a mix of leather pieces and kind of ground leather bits, along with glues, adhesives, and other additives to it. And so in the section, we start to see that as well. We don't notice those distinctive fibers so much, and it's more just kind of like a glob of a substance that is put together. So that matches what we'd expect to see, but it is fun to see it kind of close up and really get a view different than what normal, common leather looks like. And like most things, learning the history of an item can help us understand a little more where it came from and even more how and why we could use it today. So bonded leather became much more popular in the 1900s. Generally, during the war, supplies were limited. They were being used for so many different things, for production, for defense, items used across the board in terms of the military, and also with civilian life in day to day. And so leather was one of those items that was in demand, and there was a lack of supply. Being that bonded leather could be made from 30% leather, it found wider use in that time period because they were able to leverage that material to make more things that were leather-like and still be able to use the limited amount of leather that was on hand. Since then, it has become wider used as well. And today it's one of the most popular-ish I'll say leathers in the commercial world. I wouldn't say it's so popular in the crafting world. We find it in a lot of consumer products, shoes, belts, accessories, pretty much anything made of leather that they want to make more cheaply in terms of cost. You may find bonded leather. That said, because it is not genuine leather, it's not going to have the durability, the construction and kind of creative response aspects, if you will, if you're crafting with it. It's a different material. It could almost be seen as in the middle between natural leather and kind of like a faux leather. Just something to be aware of. That said, it's very, very popular in a lot of areas, and we'll look a little more into how we could use it from a crafting perspective. So the production process begins by obtaining raw materials used to make it. And this could be, recycled leather shavings. This could be fibers that are, from splits that are ground down and mixed with a bonding agent. Depending on the manufacturer, they'll make their choice in terms of what their recipe, if you will, is going to be. And they could be then mixed with rubbers or plastics or other additives to make the final composition of what that leather is going to be. And so once the material has been mixed with the bonding agent, sometimes vinyl, sometimes flame retardant additives are put in, and UV protection additives could be put in there as well. And it's up to the manufacturer's discretion. And so at that point, colors and dyes could be added in, and you've kind of got this big mixture. And once that mixture is ready, it's poured onto like a textured paper-like material that can be hot pressed to create an adhesion, and that kind of creates the process of your finished material that has a surface. They can also make, unfinished bonded leather, and here's where it's going to be, more useful for crafting purposes, and it's going to look kind of like this. And so this is a bonded leather. It's relatively flexible, and it's smooth and a little soft. And so bonded leather like this, different than what's used to, make, finished commercial goods being the top surface, leather like this can be used to reinforce a fine leather good. So for example, say you're making a fine leather belt and you want something in the middle of that belt to give it structural integrity, to kind of give it some thickness and definition, and then you've got your regular leather above it. That is when bonded leather can become really helpful, when it's essentially a layer used when making finer leather goods. So it's not all bad, and here's an example of when it's actually good, for crafting. And because of the ability to alter the recipe of it, manufacturers can make bonded leather that have different characteristics that can make them really great for different applications like that. They can vary the thickness, the strength, the flexibility, the density, and so in that aspect, it creates a variation of options that can be really appealing to crafters, because now you have a choice of what that internal material may be that you then wrap and cover with your more formal and probably nicer looking natural leathers. Production volume is estimated at around 10 billion square feet per year. The key countries where it is produced is China, India, and Vietnam. Some of the finer bonded leathers, like this is a Salamander brand from Germany, so it comes out of Germany as well. And other countries make it too. However, those are the largest producing countries of it. The biggest exporting country is China, and the biggest importing country of bonded leather is the USA. For cost, generally per square foot, it's going to be around $2 to $4. That will vary based on, again, the material and kind of the finish that's used. And if we're looking at half a hide size, we're going to be looking at $20 to $25, and a full hide's worth of bonded leather is generally going to be around $35 to $45. Of course, in this case, the reference to full hide is more in terms of size because it's not actually coming from a hide. So at the most basic level, per square foot, we're looking at around $2 to $4 per square foot for a bonded leather. And here's an example of a bonded leather belt. And so I use this because it's something that a lot of us may come across when we're shopping in stores and things like that, and they're advertising things as leather. So I thought this would be a helpful example because it's something you'll probably see out there when you're out there. So let's take a closer look. So here we've got our belt, and it looks like leather. It kind of feels like leather. Even when we turn it over, kind of leather-ish. And so it's like, okay. However, when we get a really close look, we could see it's kind of almost like that mix, right? Where they combined a bunch of leather pieces and then formed it into a shape, painted the edges, and then gave it a surface texture to look like natural leather. And so in doing that, it's a way to make something that looks like leather, and it's going to be relatively inexpensive compared to leather, and you can make products like that. So it's cool. I mean, it looks nice, it looks fine. Something to keep in mind though is that it will likely not wear and last as long as something that is natural leather. So this belt, for example, maybe will get 2 to 3 years, maybe at best, of daily use, versus a natural leather belt, which could get decades, and longer of daily wear if it's maintained well. So just an example. Again, it really varies based on what you're looking to use an item for and what you're looking to get out of it from your day-to-day experience, the look and feel. So not all bonded leather things are bad. It's just more of an awareness of when you're buying something that's bonded leather, what is going into it is essentially a mixed composition of leather that's then pressed and formed, and made to look like natural leather. So that's an example of a belt. The pros of bonded leather include a few great things. So one is that it retains the look and smell of natural-ish. I'll use the word ish because it isn't spot on, but it retains the look and smell of natural leather because they can put additives in it that make it do that, and they can press upon that, a leather surface texture to match natural leather. A really good thing is that it offers a uniform surface. Because it's, manufactured, that surface can be set and it can be pretty much look exactly the same across the entire surface. So whereas natural hides have natural blemishes, this will give you a consistent look and feel across the piece. Additionally, because it is man-made, this could be made way big. So whereas a standard leather hide is limited by the original source that it came from, bonded leather can be made to be as big, as wide, as long, pretty much any specs that you may need, and thereby giving you a much larger surface area to work with. And lastly, it is much lower cost than other types of leather. Again, because it's a man-made product with some synthetic materials in it, it can be made faster and cheaper, and that's one of the reasons why it's found success in a lot of different areas because of that cost. Some cons. So bonded leather generally has a much less durability and strength than natural leather. It's often composed of only 20 to 30% of real leather, so it won't give you that same performance over time. And the surface will peel, crack, and separate as it's being used, because again, it's not a consistent fiber throughout, it's actually just a composition. So as it wears more quickly, you'll start to see wear patterns that are different than natural leather and sometimes undesirable. Because it isn't a consistent fiber, once that wear starts to happen, it's generally difficult to repair, and sometimes they're not even worth repairing. As that material begins to wear and flake, it pretty much is gone. And so there is no structural integrity behind it, and so it offers little to no repairability once it's damaged. Good uses. So bonded leather does have some good uses for it, and they include wallets, watch straps, belts, bags, journals, furniture covers, and even lining for luxury leather goods. And so pretty much if you're looking for a low-cost leather alternative material that has a similar look and feel, this may do it. It won't give you longevity, it won't give you durability, but it'll give you look and feel and potentially a larger size than natural leather at a relatively low cost. If you do work with bonded leather, there's a couple of things that can be helpful to keep in mind. One of them is avoid adding any kind of additional markings to the surface or any kind of scratches because the material is not natural leather. It'll be a little trickier to fix or repair, and it'll also be easier to, in most cases, to mark it up like that. And when you have any exposed edges, try to roll or finish them, and that way it reduces the easiness of wear to happen on those exposed edges. You could use an edge paint or something, but essentially try to seal them in, protect them from the elements, an early wear and tear. And to avoid peeling, because the surface can sometimes be applied or stamped in and easy to pull, use like well-sharpened tools, and that way your cuts are crisp and it won't pull at the material itself. It'll just cut it so you've got nice clean lines for your projects. So that is bonded leather. If you're looking for something that is leather-ish, contains about 30% leather fibers, mixed into a big soup and pressed into a shape that looks and smells like leather, that's your bonded. And it can be great for a couple different types of work, so it all depends on what you're looking to make. But when you're researching, there's the information. So if that's something you're interested in, there you go. If you have questions, let us know. We're happy to share more. And until next time, keep crafting.